Seeing none, if anything does arise, please advise the chair. We have no delegations for this evening's meetings. And that moves us into item number 5, our 2025 -003 minutes of the meeting held December 19th, 2024. Can we get a motion to approve the meetings for December 2024? Director Wilford, Director Black, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? And that is carried. On to item 6, 2025-004, minutes of the annual general meeting held January 16th, 2025. We got a mover and a seconder to accept those minutes. Moved by Director Baldwin. Seconded by Director Vasiliadis. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor to accept those minutes? And that is carried. Thank you. And that moves us to item 7. I don't believe there is any business arising. Does anyone have any? Seeing none. On to part B, reports for approval, and that leads us to B1 2025-005, our draft watershed planning and regulations policy and procedure manual. I will turn it over to our CAO, Jeanette Levy-Smith, and I believe our manager of plan review and permitting will also be joining as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and directors. So staff are pleased to provide this draft to the board. We do have a presentation. It was part of the package in your, but we do want to walk through that presentation for the board. And really, at the end of the day, this is a key document for any conservation authority, and for us here. We walking through the report and things, we really are looking for, I'm looking for the board's support to post the document to our website and to circulate it to our member municipalities, and also engage our member municipal planning staff in a discussion around this, and that this would then come back to the April board meeting for approval. So with that, you will also remember at some point in April of 2024, we did have a number of regulations, interim regulations brought forward. And so this is again following in line with that, and a comprehensive review of the actual manual was done. We engaged staff. We had lots of collaboration and comments. And I'm very pleased that we were able to do this with our own resources. Often outside consultants are hired, but in our case, we were able to work through this over the past many months to bring you this draft. So with that, I'm going to ask Mr. Allen, if you want to lead the board through some of the slides, talking about some of the changes and why they're required.
Thank you, CAO Levy-Smith, and good afternoon, Chair Metcalf and directors. I am pleased to provide an overview of the Watershed Planning and Regulations Policy and Procedures Manual. Next slide, please. For context, the current manual was initially approved in 2012 and then had minor updates in 2015. The purpose of this document is to provide guidance and policy direction for staff, our member municipalities, the development community, and watershed residents. This guidance results in consistent direction, clarity with respect to autonomy conservation's role in plan review and regulations, and transparency on process and procedures. Next slide, please. So why is an updated document needed? Well, a lot's happened in the last decade. But more recently, there has been updates to the Conservation Authorities Act. The CA Act changes included regulations that are now in force, including Ontario Regulation 4124, which replaced the old regulation that had been in force since 2006. This regulation specifically outlined a number of required changes with respect to how conservation authorities execute development permit programs and services. The changes also harmonized further with previous direction, including that from Bill 23. These changes combined result in a core mandate to focus on natural hazards, which require to be addressed in an updated manual. Next slide, please. So key highlights include new tests for the authority to use when considering the issuance of permits and are specific to natural hazards. To assist these tests, the additional tests of health or safety were added, meaning that the authority is required to consider risk to human life and damage to property when issuing a permit approval. The new regulation requires that conservation authorities have policy and procedure in place that aligns to the new legislative and regulatory changes for processes and timelines associated with hearings and appeals. Next slide, please. Given all the legislative and regulatory changes, the updated manual will result in the following: improved transparency in the decision-making process, streamlined process, and faster approvals, clear and concise direction on how and when any new application must be deemed complete, including a required 21-day timeline for notice to an applicant. I would like to note that it has been Autonomy Conservation's practice to complete this in 14 days, and staff will continue to work towards this. Clear requirements for issuing permits in 30 days for minor and 90 days for major permits is also included in the new regulation. Autonomy Conservation staff will continue to work to the standards set by Conservation Ontario of 21 and 28 days, respectively. Next slide, please. The updated manual now contains a Part B, Chapter 9. This new section of the document outlines all the procedures related to the permit regulation. As noted earlier, there are processes that all conservation authorities are required to provide to applicants. These are outlined in this section to ensure complete transparency and respect for due process. Highlights include that permits can now be issued for longer timelines, up to 5 years. It includes the process for which an applicant can request a review if they contest a decision with regards to complete or incomplete application assessments. It outlines the decision-making process and includes all processes and procedures on how to request a hearing or appeal a decision. Development activities that are exempt from the new regulation are also now listed. Next slide, please. In addition to updating the document to conform to the legislative and regulatory requirements, additional modifications were made to provide concise and clear direction on important topics, including climate change and impacts on natural hazards, cumulative impacts of development on natural hazards, the new tests on health or safety. So this includes providing updated clarity and direction on flood proofing and safe access, two concepts that are essential in ensuring due consideration of the risk to human life and damage to property. Clarity around the application process and minimum required application submission materials are clearly articulated. An application process to allow an in-depth pre-application process that includes natural hazard assessments is outlined. The purpose of this process is to inform a faster and complete pre-consultation and complete application process to assist applicants to acquire a permit. Next slide, please. Updates to plan review specific policy includes references to natural heritage, and any previously required setbacks have been removed. This section addresses natural hazards only. Clarity around consent applications when natural hazards are not affected. Updates to permit regulation specific policy includes Autonomy Conservation no longer considers whether an activity will cause pollution or impact the conservation of land. When deciding on whether a permit can be issued, all reference to these tests have been removed. Certain references to strict size restrictions on some types of buildings have been removed. Wetlands are no longer regulated up to 120 meters. No policies require that ecological impacts be addressed. I will hand over the presentation to CAO Lovie Smith to finish off the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. So again, the intent of our presentation was just to really summarize some of those key components that have changed in the manual, and that in fact they are aligned with the legislation as we know it now. And so this has been a good exercise for staff to do. It also has been an opportunity to work through some of the lessons learned in the older manual, and where we can provide some more clarity for our applicants. And so again, today, Mr. Chair, staff are looking to have the board's support to post this and to circulate it, and that we do want to engage our member municipal staff, and then we would come back in April with a final document in terms of things. So staff are here, happy to answer any questions that the board might have, Mr. Chair.
Perfect. Thank you, Dawn. And thank you, Jeanette. Does the board have any questions at all regarding the manual? Director Baldwin?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I guess the only thanks for the report and the document. Jeanette, I'm just wondering through the chair to you, if we anticipate getting any feedback around the change in the setbacks around wetlands. I know some planning things that come to the city over the last couple terms of council, concerned about development happening within 120 meters. I'm just wondering if we expect to have any pushback on the regulation that says only 30 meters now.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So that regulation was part of 4124, and so I think there'll be some comments on all sides of that matter, in terms of things, and I know that staff have been working through that. It was a significant issue for some of our conservation authorities to the east, in terms of it, but I think we'll have a little bit of comment on both sides of the matter. It is now part of the regulation, so it is what staff are already enforcing, and need to enforce through the permitting process.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you, Director Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jeanette, the ability for an applicant to request a minister's review has been around for a little while now. Have we been through, has the Conservation Authority been through that exercise?
Mr. Chair, no, not in the way that it's written in the regulations now. It does, there's more definition and more accessibility, if you will, to applicants going directly to the minister to request that. In fact, Conservation Ontario has had some discussions with the ministry around the process for that. And so the ministry would also need to have some consultations around those types of permits, right? Because it gets right down into ground level work that the minister himself might not be able to respond to. But no, it's different than an MZO process, that and that's our only real experience. We haven't had the other experience. We do take the approach, and we are continuing to take the approach, and Mr. Allen really highlighted that we do want to work with the applicants on finding options that work within the regulations, and give the staff the ability to support the things that need to get done in the most sustainable environmental way possible. So there are not the same type of issues that might come to the board through a dispute that others might see. So I hope that answers your question, Director Taylor.
It certainly does. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Director Black?
Yeah, thank you to you, Chair Mike, to Don. Don, the reporting requirements, 30 days for minor permits and 90 days for major permits. Can you define what minor and major is, more for my education than anything?
Certainly, and through you, Chair. Basically, currently we are calling a minor permit something that is less complex and doesn't require the submission of, say, large studies that require a review. So think back pre-bill 23, we'd always be reviewing environmental impact studies. So that's sort of the difference between the minor and the major.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Director. Any other comments or questions on our report? Seeing none. The recommended motion is that report 2025-05, draft watershed planning and regulations policy and procedure manual be received, and that the board approve the draft watershed planning and regulations policy and procedural manual for circulation and post to the authority's website for comment, that staff be authorized to direct and do all things necessary to give effect to these resolutions. Can we get a mover and a seconder? Director Taylor, Director Black, and one more call. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? And that is carried. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes.
I am going to have the minutes note with your consent that Vice Chair Duguay did step out of this discussion as he, in his professional world, does apply for planning. He would have a conflict of interest in lots of ways wearing his professional hat.
Thank you. We will we'll put that on a disclosure and a conflict, and he had stepped away from the discussion. That moves us on to item B2, 2025-006, our Beavermead Campground Agreement. And I will again pass it over to our CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm very pleased to bring this to the board to the agreement for 2025 to 2029 Beavermead Campground Agreement with the City of Peterborough. It is something that we have been working with the staff at the city with, and so again, very pleased to bring it to the board for approval. The actual agreement, which is part of your package, is very much like the past agreements, and so specifically also looking at the compensation and how the revenue splits work. So no changes with respect to that. And we've also had discussions between not just staff, but our legal review has been, and they've also been in discussions with the city's legal staff. So I'm very confident that this agreement has been thoroughly reviewed by all parties and able to make the recommendation to the board that the board approves the actual agreement. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, CAO. Do we have any questions or comments from the board for our Beavermead Campground Agreement? Director Taylor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I think this is a perfect example of the old saying, if it's not broke, don't fix it. It's worked well for the last number of years, and there's no reason to think it won't continue to work well.
Thank you, Joe. Director Baldwin?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to echo what Director Taylor said. It's been a good agreement that's working well for for Orca and the City of Peterborough. And at the appropriate time, I'd be happy to move it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Director. Any other comments or concerns or thoughts? Vice Chair Duguay, we're just on item B2, our Beavermead Campground Agreement, and just in discussion still.
And Chair Metcalf, I can advise that I did have a conversation this week with Jeanette, and I'm very pleased with the fact that we have an agreement, and I'm familiar with some of its terms. So I apologize. I had to receive a call of a family matter, so apologizing for stepping out for a few minutes.
No problem. Thank you for those words. Any other comments, questions regarding the agreement? Seeing none, we have it moved by Director Taylor to approve. Do we have, yep, Director Wilford? Any further discussion?
Sorry,
Seeing-
Mr. Chair. Director
Yes.
Baldwin was going to move that, and then Director Wilford seconded.
Yes, did I say I said that incorrectly? It was Director Baldwin and Director Wilford. I had you on my speaking notes and then I saw your name. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. That brings us to item B3 2025-007, our 2025 draft capital budget. And I will turn it over to our CAO for this report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this report is in front of the board. Staff are seeking a small capital budget that would come from our operating reserves, really focusing on some of the work on Jackson Creek Trail and fixing that, and then just obviously some signage and some computers. The intention is that at the October meeting, staff will have a more comprehensive 5-year capital budget that the board would be able to consider at that time. There was no levy in the 2025 budget for the capital work. So I'm happy to answer any questions that the board might have. Oh, my apologies, Mr. Chair. I do want to highlight that staff have applied for a grant through Trans-Canada Trail to help offset the work on Jackson Creek Trail, and we have received notice that we would get that grant.
Thank you, CEO. Any questions, comments? Vice Chair Duguay?
I would be pleased to, do we require a motion to accept the report?
We will.
If you're nodding in the affirmative, I'm prepared to move that motion.
Thank you. Any further? I'm just going to call for further discussion. Director Taylor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll second it and then speak to the motion if that's okay.
We have a
Okay.
seconder.
Yeah, I'll second it and then I can speak to the motion. Jeanette, I think that there was a fundraising campaign for that Jackson Creek Trail project. Have those funds been utilized or could they be applied towards these capital repairs?
Mr. Chair, those funds have been utilized, and they were utilized through the whole rehabilitation work that happened alongside the FedDev grant. So there is no
Okay.
more funds left from that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Director. I'm just going to read the recommended motion that report 2025-007 draft 2025 capital budget be received and the board approve the 2025 capital budget for funding allocated from reserves. We have a mover, Vice Chair Duguay, and a seconder, Director Taylor. I'll call for final discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. This moves us to item C, reports for information. C1 is our 2025-008, 2024 fourth quarter and year-end performance objectives and financial report. And I will turn this back over to our CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So again, this is our 2024 year-end report. A lot of this great information is used in our annual report that will come to the board in April. So again, you will see some of this again. Happy to report. So again, it's at the end of December. So there are some other things that have actually completed that might have been marked in the coding. For example, the red has now been completed. But it really has helped staff continue to meet the objectives of the organization and the board. And so we do use these objectives into our own work plans. I would like to highlight, Mr. Chair, that there was a lot of work on our year-end financials. And of course, this needs to be confirmed through our auditing process. But there was a lot of hard work, and through some gapping dollars, we were able to end in a net operating of 123,000. And that report does clearly lay out at the bottom, Appendix B, what the actual revenues were, the actual expenses, and the net operating. And then obviously the end of the including the depreciation and how that ends us in the negative. That is good news for me. I was not anticipating that, as I have shared with you, Mr. Chair and the Vice Chair, that I was thinking that we would end in a further deficit in October of last year. So we were able to really mitigate our expenses in the last quarter of 2024. So I'm happy to answer any questions that the board might have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, CAO. I'll open the floor for questions, comments on our performance objectives and last quarter financials. Seeing none, I will, Vice Chair Duguay.
I'm prepared to move the acceptance of the report.
Thank you. So the recommended motion is that report number 2025-008, fourth quarter and 2024 year-end financials and activity report be received for information. Moved by Vice Chair Duguay. Do we have a seconder? Director Black. Any further comments or discussion? Director Black?
Yeah, thank you through your chair. Just with respect to the depreciation expense, is that mostly the building we own, or do we depreciate property? Do we take depreciation on any other types of assets? It's maybe a question for budget time, but I'm surprised it's that big of a number for us.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So it's buildings and our infrastructure, and we at Otonabee Conservation don't have a lot of complicated infrastructure. You will hear a little bit more about this as you sit on the finance committee, and so this will be a discussion with the auditor and our manager of corporations or corporate services as well. So I just wanted to be able to bring that picture to the board today, because really at the end of the day, I was thinking the net operating would be significantly deficit. So it's a good news in terms of that side of the issue. And obviously the adding the depreciation takes us into the negative.
Yeah, appreciate that. Great work on keeping the expenses under control in our last period for sure. Fantastic.
Thank you, Director. Any further comments or questions? We have a mover and a seconder. I will call for anyone in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. This moves us on to item C2, 2025-009 Board Report Plan. And I will turn it back over to our CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So following along what we have done last year, this is a report that just sort of outlines all of the different reports coming forward as we plan them throughout the year. Of course, things might happen that we will obviously bring something to the board right away, but this helps us keep our work organized, and you can also see what type of subject matters are coming up. I've also highlighted where we have the virtual meetings and the in-person meetings, and just looking to secure in the June location and balancing out the agenda matters as much as we can from a workload and a board perspective. So it's really here for information, Mr. Chair, but to give a glance of what 2025 is going to look like.
Thank you, CAO. Yeah, that puts everything on one page and makes one click instead of multiple clicks. So it is very helpful. Any questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, that report, the recommended motion is report number 2025-009, 2025 Board of Directors Report Plan be received for information. A mover and a seconder. Director Vasiliadis. Vice Chair Duguay. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. On to item C3, our 2025-010 CAO monthly activity report. Jeanette?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So again, it has been a busy while since last time we've had our meeting. So I've listed a number of things that staff are participating in. The job fairs, we haven't done that in a while, and that actually is working out quite well in terms of reaching. And we've also working with the Friends of Hope Mill on submitting a grant, a Ontario Trillium grant for the roof replacement. So that will be in the next couple of weeks. And of course, our tree seedling sales, they're going very well. And it's a popular program for our residents in our watershed. So I've just highlighted a few things. There's some more things, obviously, that will come through in future reports, but I'm happy to answer any questions that the board might have.
Thank you,
If I
Jeanette.
might, Chair Metcalf, to Jeanette, the job fair that you speak of, I believe that was rescheduled to the 27th of February.
That's correct.
I plan to attend, and I'm pleased to advise that the city's newly hired Director of Economic Development will join me.
You can stop by our table.
I will be stopping by your table. I'm out looking for at AMO, for example. I'm out looking for like mints, because at AMO there was mints galore. Sorry, I digress. But I just wanted to let you know that I would be there, and I did receive the note about cancellation. Our Director of Economic Development will join us, and I'll make sure that if you are there or staff, that I introduce Daryl to staff accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Any further comments or questions regarding the CAO report? Don't. Director Black?
Sorry, through Chair Metcalf. The Peterborough County one, where is that one? It says Peterborough County, but in Fleming College and Lindsay. Is it Fleming College in Peterborough?
So that one actually, Mr. Chair, was one of the days that it was the snow that we had a significant storm, but it was Fleming College in Lindsay. And the programs that run out of there are more related to the types of things that staff, the managers, were looking for. But it was one of the days that was the snow day. So they carried on. Just
okay, I get. Sorry, I'm misreading it, thinking that. Sorry, through your chair, I'm misreading it, thinking you're doing it with the county. It's not in the county. The two job fairs, not one's in the county and the other one's in Lindsay.
There are two job fairs, and the county is actually taking the lead of the one that's in the city of Peterborough at the Healthy Planet. They're the ones that is coordinating, and then the second one was with Fleming College, located in Lindsay.
So for clarity, it's the 27th now at Healthy Planet?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate the clarification.
No problem.
Thank you, Director. Any further comments or questions? Don't believe I see any. A couple screens are frozen, so I think we're good. The recommended motion is that board report number 2025-010 CAO Secretary Treasurer Monthly Report be received for information. Can we get a mover and a seconder? Director Baldwin, Director Wilford, all those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. On to item C4, 2025-011 media highlights. Fairly straightforward report here. Does anyone have any questions, comments regarding our December, January media report? Don't see any. Can I get a mover and a seconder to receive our media report? Director Black. Yeah, I'm having some issues with my screen freezing. I'm not seeing everyone.
Director
Do we have a
Taylor.
seconder?
Director
Director
Taylor.
Taylor, thank you, Director. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. We have no correspondence for this evening. Do we have any open forum? Vice Chair Duguay.
I apologize to the board for having you step out. Just, but I'm not certain if it was said earlier, but if it has, I'm being repetitive. But to Director Boyko, happy belated birthday. No, on
It was not.
the social media post said that you were
Thank you.
turning 54. I don't know about that, but
I'm telling people I'm 84, so people say, man, he's looking good.
Well, thank you for that information and happy birthday, Director Boyko.
I have a second comment, if I might. I was related to communication and information. Given the sustained winter, which the snow accumulation, and I think all of us probably share the concern that if the melt of the snow is incremental, great. If it happens in a more rapid fashion, I suspect the flood watch and flood related notices will be a more robust program. So it's just a comment. I do appreciate receiving that information, but here's hoping that it's an incremental melt.
Yes, you are correct in those statements, and that's what we watch for in the coming months. That leads us to closed session, and I will call for a motion to move into closed session. Vice Chair Duguay, Director Black, all in favor? And that is carried. We'll just give a moment and get some